When you've run out of affordable housing options to purchase in your area, many people turn to rent. And if you've seen rental prices for the last 3 years, you've seen that they've done nothing but go up. But there's been whispers in the air that there's going to be some ways that the rental market is about to collapse. So we're going to be talking about those reasons. And then you can determine at the end if you think the rental market is about to collapse or are these high rents here to stay. It'll be really interesting. I want to hear what you're going to have to say at the end. So let's talk about that. So I don't know if you saw this article that came out right before the Super Bowl talking about Airbnbs, and the Airbnb business during the Super Bowl, like literally didn't do poop. And historically, during this time, rentals during the Super Bowl go up exponentially and they're always rented out. So people that had Airbnbs around the Super Bowl area, of course, raised their Airbnb prices exponentially. Well, they didn't get rented out. And so they dropped their prices thinking, okay, well, that's not going to work. So we'll just go ahead and drop them. They still didn't get rented out. A lot of like TikTokers and YouTubers, I'm not calling out any names, they say this is a sign the Airbnb business is going to collapse and it's going to make rental prices drop exponentially and it's going to make home prices drop because some people are going to end up trying to sell their Airbnb. Okay, so here's the truth. When it comes to Airbnb, don't get me wrong, I think they're a great business plan, especially if you have a few in an area that is desirable. The thing is there isn't that many Airbnbs across the country. Even if everybody that owns an Airbnb was to fold up their business and decide to put their house either on the market for a long-term rental, it would not even put tiniest dent in either housing prices or in rental prices. It could possibly drop it down in a specific area if there's like tons of Airbnbs in that one little microcosm, but just the Airbnb business collapsing is not going to make home prices drop and it's not going to make rental prices go down. It's just not. Let me just pull this up. I found this statistic that talked about how many Airbnbs there are throughout the country here. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong statistic. Hold on. Okay, there's only 877,694 Airbnbs, and not necessarily are those going to be in the most affordable housing range. So, like I said, even if the Airbnb business was to totally like go under, 877,000 homes spread throughout the country isn't going to make that much of a difference. I know it's wishful thinking, and I know many of you really, really, really hate the Airbnb landlords because they make you clean up after yourself after you've rented their house out, and you can get into that in the comments section, but it isn't going to make rental prices go down if they fold under. Just saying. So let's get into the next reason why people say that the rental market is about to collapse. This one's interesting. So there's been a significant shift in the REITs market because people have been talking about REITs forever and how people have been making record profits on REITs, and it allows people to invest in real estate without even actually owning a home. They own like a little piece of that home. Like you might have seen like lots of investment firms that are buying manufactured home parks, they're buying condominiums, and those are all anchored in with REITs. There's other things that are anchored in with REITs as well. It isn't just residential real estate. But at the end of last year, the REITs market kind of took a hit, and people are saying that some of these bigger firms are probably going to be cutting the fat, causing a lot of the normally rented out communities to either A, be forced to be sold, or B, go into short sale and foreclosure. To me, that's like wishful thinking. One bad quarter doesn't allow for a whole entire housing market sector to just decide to pull out. REITs have been extremely popular and they've been very profitable for investors for quite some time. Would this small blip for a period of time isn't going to make them like pull the plug now? Now, I'm not saying that if in the future, if it continues to not make money, they won't start cutting the fat. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is as of today, no, the REITs market falling apart wouldn't be the sole factor, a rental market. Now, if there was a significant shift in the REIT market, such as a decline in the value of the REITs, it could lead to a decrease in investment capital available to construction of new rental properties or the purchase of existing ones. This could result in a reduction in the supply of rental properties and increase rental prices. However, it's important to note that the residential rental market is determined by many factors. The REITs investors don't own the entire building. They only own like a few pieces of those properties in condominium associations. Now, some of the more build to rent communities, I've talked about those in previous videos, those are also tied to REITs as well. If they started selling off their properties, that could cause more of a problem in an area, but most likely they're going to try to sell them first before they try to reduce the rents. Most likely they're going to just reduce the rents before they try to sell them because the whole community was designed for a build to rent. So this could be just more wishful thinking, but I don't think the collapse of a REITs market would cause rental prices to completely tank. Now, all these factors, if the Airbnb business and the REITs business started to go down, yes, of course, then rents would come down. There's so many different factors that factor into this. So, it isn't going to be one single thing. All right, excuse this interruption, but I have to share this with you. So you know who Elon Musk is, and you know that he has a big company out in Austin, Texas. What you may not know is the rent in Austin, Texas has been astronomically high, and the prices of houses have gone up exponentially as well. So Elon, with his ultimate wisdom, is going to make a neighborhood that makes it more affordable for people to buy a house or rent in a house in his area. Now, the fine details haven't been done about this. Apparently, he's going to work with Lennar to make these homes in Austin, Texas, for his employees to be able to purchase homes. But I'm just kind of wondering, why isn't he paying his employees enough money that they could possibly buy a home without having to buy it from Elon himself? I don't know. It's just something to chew on. I just thought it was kind of strange that he doesn't pay his employees enough that they can buy a house. The guy's a rich guy. He can afford to pay him, I think. But let's talk about another thing that people have been talking about, why rental prices are going to start to collapse. But home construction has slowed down because the builder sentiment last year was 8. There's this builder sentiment index that's out. And every time it comes out for the last year, I'm saying the last 12 months, they always say, oh, the builder sentiment is bad. And builders are like, well, we're not going to go ahead and build residential houses because nobody's buying right now. So we're going to go into the multifamily units. So they've been building condos, multifamily units, and all these different things. And yes, that's tied to REITs, right? So if builders are no longer building houses, which we have a shortage of homes, and they went ahead and started building tons of multifamily units, condos, those kinds of things, we're going to have an influx of inventory when it comes to those hitting the market. And this is the one thing I do think is going to cause rental prices to drop, because they have been building a lot of condos, especially in South Florida, Phoenix, Arizona. They were doing it in Las Vegas. They've been building a lot, but not homes, just multifamily units. So once those are completed and done and everything's dry, the paint's dry, which it always takes a while for those things to be completed. Once they're done, they're going to have a lot more units in the area that are going to be up for rent. And of course, that always makes more competition. More competition means that there's going to be a reduction in rental prices, which is a great thing for you if you were thinking about renting instead of purchasing. But again, it could still take a while. Buildings don't get built overnight. And even though they have started on a project, they always abandon them for some reason. But it could still take some time. As you know, when it comes to builders, they take their sweet time when it comes to building anything. And multifamily units have to go through all this regulatory oversight as well. Oh, and since we're talking about regulating oversight, so a lot of people were talking about the fact that some areas have had such an explosion in rent costs that there's going to be more legislation that's hitting the tables of many cities across the country. And they're talking about doing rent control like they do in New York City and Los Angeles. And of course, if that happens in some of these other cities that there's a lot of investors involved, it could pull out some of the bigger investors because they don't want to be capped on how much they can and cannot raise their rents. Nothing has been passed yet, but there are whispers of that. Now, if you are in an area that does have a lot of rentals and they do put in these rent caps, you could see a lot more rental properties hit the market because investors want to make money. And if they're being told that they have to stop making as much money as possible, they're going to pull out. Not all areas will do that. And still, there's plenty in New York City that have been making lots of money and still have rent-controlled apartments. But for some of those smaller investors, they could easily decide to just pull out of the market altogether and make it open for other people to either A, rent, B, sell. The only downside of that is they could sell it to a larger investor that doesn't have a problem with the rent control. Or if it's in a condo association, they could just put it on the market for sale, which would be a good thing if you're looking for a more affordable housing option. You might be able to get a deal that way. But that's a big if you live in a city and they decide to put in these rent control kinds of things. Normally, I would say 9 times out of 10, whenever these ever hit the docket for them to vote on it, it's always shut down right away. Because as you know, and I'm sure you're not clueless in the fact that politicians are paid, their campaigns are paid by big corporations. And if big corporations own a lot of rental units in an area, do you think that those politicians would necessarily vote against the interest of the person who's actually giving them money for their campaign? I mean, I know they're supposed to represent us as people, but we all know how the world works now. Our blinders have been removed. And I don't think that rent control is going to be one of those things they're going to be voting to go, yay, for people, even though it's probably something that's pretty necessary in some cities. So speaking of those big companies that own a lot, We have Open Door, OfferPad, iBuyers. There's like a million of these really big conglomerates that own a lot of these rental properties. Here's the thing. There's a lot of them that are going under too because they made terrible business practices over the pandemic. They were buying houses way over asking price because they could get cheap money. The interest rates at the time were like under 3%. Some of them were getting them at like 2.2%, and they were buying a lot of houses. They didn't care that they were paying over because they were like, whatever, we'll just get the rent on it. And it had worked for them for some period of time. Some of those homes, they did turn around and flip them, but their hopes were to rent them out. Some of them fixed them up, what they call like lipstick on a pig, painted them, put some carpet down, and they will either A, put them up for resale, or they put them back up for rent. A lot of them are failing. If a good portion of those companies have those properties that can't get either sold or rented out, that could cause a big problem in the rental prices. Problem not really for us as consumers, problem for them as big companies. If they have to unload a bunch of those properties, that could not only just benefit the rental market, that could also benefit the housing market as a whole. They invested a lot in some of the most popular cities throughout the country. We're talking about Austin, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, Miami, Orlando. And if they have a problem with their business plan now and they can't get people to rent out those properties and they're not going to be able to sell them, they might have to unload them. You could possibly get a deal that way. But all in all, even that, I don't think that one thing is going to be the thing that causes rental prices to go down. There's going to take all of those things at once coming together in order for rental prices to come down dramatically. Now, we have seen rental prices come down in the most popular cities that, of course, saw the biggest rises, but they needed to come down. In a lot of cities, rent does not match the average income in the area, and it's not sustainable. So within the next year or two, we're going to probably see a lot more rental prices come down some. But unless we see all of these little markets collapse, we're not going to see significant price drops in rental prices, just like with home prices. But that is my opinion. I want to know your opinion when it comes to rental prices and the collapse of rentals. Let me know in the comments section below. To watch more videos about the collapse of the housing market, you're going to want to watch these videos right here. My name is Kristina Smallhorn, your real estate whisperer, and I tell you all this because good real estate information matters.